Okay, we are here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia with Carol Kuniholm, who is the chair of Fair Districts Pennsylvania. Carol, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Before we start talking about the redistricting process, can you tell us a little bit about Fair Districts Pennsylvania?
Fair Districts Pennsylvania, PA, Fair Districts PA was started 6 years ago to address gerrymandering in Pennsylvania, to work towards having fair maps in this redistricting cycle, but going forward. In other words, we would like to see legislation passed that would put a better process in place for all of our legislative maps.
So what is the process like right now?
Right now, we have two different processes, one for congressional and one for state legislative. We'd like to see it be one process with one independent citizens commission. The current way is for the congressional maps, they're passed as a bill by the state legislature, and then the governor can sign off on that bill or he can veto that bill. For the past 4 decades, the governor has been the same party as the legislature. And so if that's the case, they can draw a map that benefits their party. And for the last 2 decades, the legislature and the governor have been the same party, the Republican Party, and they've drawn maps to benefit the Republican Party. This time it's different. We have a Republican legislature, we have a Democratic governor, and that's created a bit of confusion and chaos, but in a good way for the voters of Pennsylvania. That's the congressional. For the state House and Senate map, there's a 5-person commission, the majority leader in the House and Senate, the minority leaders in the House and Senate, and then those 4 are supposed to choose a 5th person to be the chair. They, as far as I know, have never agreed on that 5th person. And if they can't agree, then the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court chooses the 5th person, and they did choose the 5th person this time, Mark Nordenberg, who was a chancellor of the University of Pittsburgh Law School.
So last time and this time, we've seen the state Supreme Court play a pretty big role in this process. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why that's so significant?
Well, actually, last time the Supreme Court didn't play a big role. What happened was we got extremely gerrymandered maps, which locked in a very large advantage for the Republican Party. So in the last decade, we've had 18 congressional seats. The map that we had locked in 13 out of those 18 for Republicans, even when Democrats got more than 50% of the vote, Republicans got 13 out of 18 seats. That's a pretty large skew. And so in 2018, the League of Women Voters and the Public Interest Law Center sued the state to say this is an extreme partisan gerrymander, and the Pennsylvania state constitution promises the people of Pennsylvania free and equal elections. If the outcome of the election is locked in, then we do not have free and equal elections. And the Supreme Court agreed. In 2018, the Supreme Court said this is an unlawful map, invited the legislature to draw a new one. They did not do that. And the Supreme Court chose a special master to provide a new map. That new map has given us 9 Republicans and 9 Democrats for the last 2 congressional races, a much more even outcome and much more reflective of the state. This time, the state legislature did pass a map, but they did not follow the governor's guidelines that he had given. And the governor had said, if you don't negotiate with the other party, if you give me a partisan map, if you don't really include public input, I'll veto it. He vetoed it. And at that point, it went to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Well, actually, it went to the Commonwealth Court. Commonwealth Court chose 1 judge. They invited submissions by a number of parties who had appealed, and they ended up with 13 map submissions. The 1 judge from the Commonwealth Court was going to choose one of those maps, and the Supreme Court said, we are not, this is not the right process, that actually the Commonwealth Court is not the right court to be choosing the final map, certainly not just 1 judge from the Commonwealth Court. And so the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said, you can have hearings on those maps, you can make a recommendation, but the Supreme Court will choose the final map. They did that last Wednesday, the 23rd, and that's the map that congressional candidates are now filing nomination petitions on the basis of that map.
And, in Fair Districts PA's opinion, how does this map look? Is it as fair as it can be?
It is a good map. And, there was lots of discussion. There were 2 full days of hearings in Commonwealth Court and then another day of hearings with the Supreme Court on what is a fair map. And there's lots of ways to evaluate it. But we would say that the map that was chosen by the traditional redistricting metrics is a very good map. So it has less split counties, less split municipalities. It's more compact. Certainly far better than the map that we had in 2011 and the last decade. But it also stayed very close to the map that was put in place by the Supreme Court in 2018. So this was the least change map. And I think that might be part of why the court chose this. We still haven't seen the court order that explains their decision, but this had the least change, and it certainly is one of the most balanced in terms of partisan metrics, partisan bias. So in other words, it's a map that will be responsive to voters. If voters go blue, the map will go blue. If voters go red, the map will go red. If you were going to predict out of the 17 seats we have, and we were going from 18 to 17 seats, if you're trying to predict, you would have a hard time predicting which party will get that 1 extra seat, because it will really, really very much depend on the election. So there's no baked in advantage to one side or the other with this map. It's a fair map.
Okay, and that's unique now, because I remember, as long as I've been watching this, it wasn't until a few years ago that the maps started, the districts actually looked like plots of land rather than sea animals or whatever they were. I remember the old 7th Congressional out in Delaware County had, if I'm not mistaken, 1 precinct connecting these 2 large portions of it. And it went all the way out into Chester County, and it was a mess.
That district was named Goofy Kicking Donald because it looked like a cartoon character. And there were 2 places where the district became so narrow, it was the width of a parking lot. And it actually went through 5 different counties, went through Montgomery, Chester, Lancaster, Berks, and Delaware counties. And 5 different counties in an area that there was no explanation for it except looking for Republican voters in a very purple area.
That's right. That's right. Now, what about the State House and State Senate maps? How are they looking?
They also, I think, are far, far better than what we've had in the past. We have been suffering under very gerrymandered House and Senate maps for a long time. Actually, the Senate map has been gerrymandered to give Republicans at least 4 extra seats in any hypothetical 50-50 election. The GOP would get 4 or 5 extra seats for the last 30 years. And the House map in this last decade was drawn to give the GOP 15 extra seats in the House in that hypothetical 50-50 election. These maps don't completely do away with a partisan bias towards Republicans. In other words, there's a slight bias towards Republicans, but it's about 1/3 what it was in the last decade. So for the Senate map, it goes from about 4.5 extra seats to about 1.5 extra seats. In the House, it goes from about 15 extra seats to about 5 extra seats in that hypothetical 50-50 election. So if you look at the way Pennsylvania votes, both of those maps now become toss-ups. Whatever the turnout's going to be, good candidates can swing that map, and it will be much more responsive to the people of Pennsylvania, and far less county splits, far less municipal splits, and the districts are far more compact in both maps.
I'd like to bring Ms. Clay Murray here on WPPM 106.5.
Hi, and thank you so much for joining us. My questions are about specifically how people of color have fared in how these districts are drawn. When you look nationally at how redistricting has been done, you see a lot of maps that are specifically targeted in terms of neutralizing the power of marginalized communities because the census says there are starting to be more of us. Do you see the same thing with the Pennsylvania maps? And if so, what's being done to correct that?
Well, I would say the congressional map, we were pleased to see it scored best. There were only 1 or 2 maps that could possibly be considered to have scored better in terms of minority representation. The map that was chosen has 2 majority minority districts and another minority opportunity district. So was drawn to give minority communities a real say in how the districts go. And for the House map in particular, we were very pleased to see that it was drawn with great attention to minority representation. I will say that Representative Joanna McClinton, the minority leader, was a member of the commission, and she had hired a voting rights expert to consult with in drawing her contribution to the House map. And they looked very closely to see where have communities of color grown, and where is it possible to create majority minority districts where there have not been those districts, and where is it possible to create opportunity districts where minority community members will not be the majority, but a large enough voice that they will have a strong say in what outcome there is. And they actually, that map created a number of districts without incumbents, minority districts with no incumbents, which when you think about it, you can have a district that by number looks like a majority minority district, but if there's an incumbent there, it makes it very hard to shift the representation in that district. They deliberately drew quite a few districts that did not have incumbents, that had majority minority populations or large opportunity for minority representation. So the House map, I would say, we had done a lot of work on what we called the People's Map, which we invited community members to weigh in on. And we worked closely with the group called Pennsylvania Voice, which did a lot of outreach in minority communities to invite people to draw unity maps reflecting their communities. We incorporated those unity maps into our People's Map, and we thought had done a really good job creating more minority opportunity in our map. When we saw the House map, we were surprised because the House map actually did better than us. I mean, they created some districts that we had not seen the possibility for. For instance, Norristown is now kind of the heart of a strong minority opportunity district without an incumbent. So that opens the door for new representation. So the House map, I think, does a really good job in that. The Senate map, not quite so good. I think there was some improvement in the Senate map over the past map. Didn't go quite as far as we would like. The Senate map is a little challenging in that map was negotiated very much between the Senate leaders, and because senators are elected every 4 years, there's a tendency to not try to shake it too much, because then you end up with a lot of special elections. The Senate map did more incumbent protection than we would have liked to see, but it's certainly better than the past Senate map.
Now, in terms of incumbent protection, one of the questions I've always had when it comes to redistricting is, why is it that the very people who are looking to stay in office, why do you get to decide who votes for you and who doesn't? Why is it that politicians, the one group of people that would benefit most from any map, are having the say on this? And what's being done to change that? Because it really doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense, and no other major democracy allows it. It's a conflict of interest, and politicians should not be choosing their voters. Voters should be choosing the politicians. In Pennsylvania, the way the House and Senate maps are drawn is in our state constitution now. And so to change it, we have to get the legislature to pass a state constitutional amendment twice, and then it has to go to a public referendum. We can't get the legislative leaders to give that. We've tried, and we've had 110 co-sponsors on that bill. We've had more co-sponsors on our amendments than any other bill in the last couple of sessions, but the leaders will not allow a vote on those bills because they hold control by controlling the mapping process, and they award benefit to their incumbents by giving them safe districts, and they punish legislators who don't do what they're told by giving them not safe districts. And the legislative leaders do not want to change the process. We're trying hard to find a way to change it in Pennsylvania, but we don't have citizens initiative, so we can't bypass the legislature. We have to go through the same legislature that benefits from those maps. But I will say, this time around, the chair of that commission, the Legislative Reapportionment Commission, Chairman Mark Nordenberg, should be Citizen of the Decade for Pennsylvania, I'll be honest, because he really came to this saying, I am not here to be the final vote on the side of the legislative leaders. I'm here to be the vote on behalf of 13 million Pennsylvanians. And I think he worked hard to do that. One thing we haven't talked about is prison, the count of prison, people who are incarcerated. We worked hard with some allies. Free the Ballot, Abolitionist Law Center were two of those allies. We worked hard to help people understand that the Census Bureau counts incarcerated people where they're incarcerated, which in Pennsylvania takes representation from places like Philadelphia and puts it into very rural counties like Forest County, where a third of the population of Forest County is in prison. So it takes representation from urban areas and puts it into very rural areas where those legislators often put in place policies that are supporting mass incarceration in direct opposition to the needs of communities where those people are from. And so some states have passed bills requiring the people who draw the maps to reapportion those numbers back to the home communities. Representative Joanna McClinton had a bill to do that. It never got a vote, but she introduced a resolution to the commission because she was one of the commissioners. She introduced a resolution to reapportion that data, and Chairman Mark Nordenberg voted for it, as did Senator Jay Costa. So most of our people who are in state prison were reapportioned back to their home communities in these House and Senate maps, which is a big win, and helps shift representation back to minority communities who are often the ones harmed by mass incarceration.
And for my last question, the state Supreme Court has sanctioned these particular maps. But when you look at the federal Supreme Court and you see the decisions that they're making in terms of maps that are in many cases so blatantly racist that it's ridiculous, have you heard any talk about this map being appealed to the Supreme Court? And if it is, are you concerned about that?
Well, the congressional map has been appealed to the Supreme Court, I believe just it was yesterday or today. There are some potential candidates and their supporters who say the Supreme Court does not have the right to select a map, and that we should actually be having an at-large election for our 17 congressional representatives. That has gone to the Supreme Court. There's also been there was an appeal by our House Majority Leader, Carrie Benninghoff, to a district court, federal district court, to disallow the new House and Senate map and to use the maps that were drawn in 2011 and 2012 for the 2022 election. That appeal has been flatly denied by the federal district court. The other appeal on the congressional map is out there. Our assumption is that the Supreme Court has said they are not, there was an important case from Alabama where the district court had said the map was a racial gerrymander and needed to be redrawn. And the legislature appealed. The Supreme Court said it's too close to the election to be redrawing maps. We are not going to hear this case and use the map that the legislature drew. That was weeks ago. So if weeks ago they said, we're not hearing this case now, they will have a very difficult time taking any maps from Pennsylvania and redoing them at this point. So our assumption is they're not going to hear cases on Pennsylvania maps at this point. It's too close to the election. The congressional map is already being used to gather nomination petitions. There is still an open door for petitions regarding the House and Senate map until this coming Monday. And then the state Supreme Court has said the Legislative Reapportionment Commission has until next Friday to answer those appeals, and then they will be deciding immediately after what happens. And my assumption is they're going to say, good map, we're done. Go get to work. That's our assumption. We'll be very surprised if we don't use the current maps for this coming election.
Okay, thank you. And we're back with Larry McGlynn. You have any other questions, Larry?
There we go. I just had to unmute myself. Yeah, the last thing I'd like to ask you. So we have these new maps, which are good, better than what they had been. What are you and your organization going to be working on now?
We are working, we will continue to work towards an independent citizens redistricting commission, because as anybody who has been watching this knows, it's been it has not been a smooth process. There's been accusations of gerrymandering, there's been litigation, there's been confusion, there's been delay. And we think that there's been confusion too, because there's been 4 different places where people could offer comment or submit maps. It's been very confusing, very hard to find the right information and hard to understand what's going on. We think there should be one process, one commission, one public website, one place to offer comments, and a very clear schedule. And very clear criteria. The criteria has not been clear in any place. The court is trying to clarify criteria, but the legislature certainly has not made clear any criteria for our congressional maps. So we're going to be working for an independent commission with clear criteria. We're also working hard to call attention to the fact that the state legislature doesn't listen well to voters. The fact that we had 110 co-sponsors on bills. The legislative leaders can ignore their colleagues and they can ignore the people of Pennsylvania. So there's something broken in the way that our legislature works. We're talking about fixing Harrisburg and getting better legislative rules. So we have plenty of work to do to make sure that we get good representation in Harrisburg. So fairdistrictspa.com, if people want to know more about us, take a look at fairdistrictspa.com. There's a lot to learn. And it's really important to remember state legislatures matter a lot. This election will be important. I should also mention, there's at least 28 House districts that will not have incumbents in this election, either because of the way the new districts were drawn or because there were incumbents who have ignored their voters for years, who looked at the map and said, oh my, I'm going to have to work in that district. I think I won't. Or where the vote share has shifted enough that the incumbents just don't want to bother trying to run in those districts. So there's at least 28 districts without incumbents. It's going to be a really important legislative election, as well as the governor, as well as the US senator. So this is a year for people to really pay attention, participate, and we could see some really significant changes in the way we're represented if people turn out and vote in this next year.
Carol Kuniholm, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.